Well, all right. Welcome, folks, to Pilgrim's Grey Chronicles, 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. Hope you got your coffee with you. I'm your host, Robert Clark. This is a journey for wanderers like us who roam this world, not because we're lost, but because there's something we're seeking here. Here we take up the call to be stewards of what matters, tending to truth and story with care, as a certain gray wanderer might have done. So join us each week on this path, Monday at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. We set out for a long-form track, an hour or more of deep reflections on the forces shaping our way. Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, we pause to hear from you, fellow travelers, with your comments, emails, and maybe a few echoes from the week's road out there in the world. Then, Friday nights at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, we sift through the week's top stories, finding the gold amid the dust and how it relates to the strange war that we find ourselves in this world. And the world is strange, is it not? This is Pilgrim's Grey Chronicles, a hearth for the weary, the curious, and the resolute. Please come walk with us by liking, subscribing, and sharing this everywhere to help wake people up, right? We need people walking with us. And if you don't know how to wake people up yourself, by all means, share this information with others. So today we are going over the Nephilim playbook, as I have promised for some time now. And we've kind of put it off for other things. But I think this is an important podcast. Up and coming, we'll also do, after this, what will probably turn out to be a 3-part series. I'm not sure yet. I know at least 2 parts because I could not cover it all in one episode. There's just too much information here. And I want to start by laying the foundation for this tactics. The Nephilim playbook is what I'm calling it, ancient tactics of deception and disruption, because we need to know who the they are. We hear the they all the time, they this, they that, and we all think it's political figures, men in power, and so on. But I think the world and many people out there, and I know especially this audience, are hip to the fact that there's a lot more going on than just human interaction. Now, some think it's aliens. Some just chalk it up to some mysterious interdimensional beings. But I want to just share what I've gleaned. This is the perspective from my studies. Feel free to disagree. But here you're going to hear a completely different take on the news in the world. And like I'm not just going to report the news like on Friday nights where I give you the top 3 stories. You're going to hear why I think they're important. And kind of like, you remember history class? It was, if you had a history teacher that just taught you to memorize dates and things, was that not boring to you? I mean, it's important to memorize dates and things like that, but my favorite history teachers all told me the why. Like, why does this matter? Why is it applicable to today? And why should we even care? Well, that's what I like to do. And I do it in the context of a biblical filter and from a specific divine counsel seed war worldview. And even within that framework, there are disagreements. But hopefully, we can all get beyond that and just have our pipe tobacco handy and all get along, right? Find a good log and chit-chat. So, Part 1 here, we'll just jump right in. The Nephilim playbook, ancient tactics of deception and disruption. So, we just need to buckle up because today we're not going to be messing around, with the kiddie pool version of Bible stories here. I know you've heard the Sunday school classics, snakes, giants, floods. But what if I told you the real tale's more of a cosmic heist? So picture this, angel-human hybrids, their fallen angel dads, and a posse of human sellouts pulling strings to rob humanity blind of its destiny. So welcome to the Nephilim playbook, advanced edition, because you're not here for baby food theology, right? Most of you are very familiar with much of this. And And if you're not, you're going to still get some basics too. So, hang in there. It's not like we're going to have you going from your walking feet to riding a stallion or anything. We'll put training wheels on this as well. So let's start with, who is they, right? We've got the Nephilim, those freakish giant offspring from Genesis 6 and their parents, the B'nai Elohim, rebel angels who couldn't handle heaven's HOA rules, I guess. And if you add in their corrupted bloodlines and human fanboys, and you've got a crew that's been punking us since the garden, right? Their mission, thwart God's big plan, that Genesis 3:15 promise about a seed crushing their heads. And here's the twist. These rebels might be stuck here, bouncing between our dirt and some spirit world VIP lounge, reconstituting themselves like, the Highlander immortals with blood rituals and different technologies, from pyramid stones to who knows what, because the world is so strange. And this is part one of a two-parter. And so today we're going to be cracking open their ancient playbook from Genesis to Revelation. And next week, we're going to trade swords for screens. So if you think, CSI, Celestial Subversion, some crimes you've heard of, some were dusting for fingerprints, right? So let's dig in. I think what we'll find is that many of these strategies are the same. It's just different technology. So again, who are the they? Let's ID these perps, and we're going to go deep here because you don't build a house on sand. The B'nai Elohim, or sons of God, really kick this off. In Genesis 6, 1 through 2, it says that when man began to multiply on the face of the land, and I know many of you are familiar with this, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Now, who are these guys? Job 1:6 kind of clues us in. It says, quote, "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them." Now, I know that Satan isn't his name. It is a title, more descriptive than anything. I've heard different names, Halel, Samael. That's neither here nor there. This divine council, the divine council members, angels, sure, but not your halo and harp types. These are named players in 1 Enoch 6 through 8. You have Azazel, Semyaza, some 200 watchers total with resumes that, like a supervillain LinkedIn, war technology, sorcery, chaos management. And they didn't just fall. They belly flopped into humanity. They, saw the ladies and they thought, well, hey, let's start a family band, except it's all death and death metal and destruction, right? I mean, it's a real problem. And they're stuck. They're stuck. Jude 1:6 kind of spells it out, where it says, "And the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling, he has kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day." 2 Peter 2:4 doubles down on that and says, "For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment, bound yet meddling." How? Maybe dual citizens, trapped on earth but popping into a spirit world speakeasy? You think of Ugaritic myths, El's Council, with rogue factions like Mot or Yam steering trouble, or 1 Enoch 6:6 says they descended on Mount Hermon, a cosmic beachhead. Still buzzing in Psalm 68:15 through 16, where it says, "O mountain of God, mountain of Bashan, O many-peaked mountain, mountain of Bashan, why do you look with hatred, O many-peaked mountain, at the mountain that God desired for his abode?" So Bashan seems to be their turf. Og's crib, if you remember him, and more on that later. Their kids, the Nephilim. Genesis 6:4. But before we say that, I just want to say that just because some of them were locked in prison at the time, it appears that not all of them were, obviously. And even the ones locked in prison seem to be able to impact the others in some way, where there's this possibility of going back and forth between worlds. And in doing so, I guess the best way to think of it is maybe, in modern analogy, you have criminal lords. They're in prison, but they still rule their empires from the prison, right? So just think of it in terms like that. Or if you've ever watched The Blacklist, we know the main character in that, he may be under arrest or house arrest, but he still impacts the world and his business from prison. They have their way. So, again, Genesis 6:4, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were mighty men who were of old, the men of renown, Gibborim, mighty men, 7-foot-plus nightmares, but also cultural architects, pre-flood influencers. Sumerian Apkallu taught wisdom and war. Greek titans birthed heroes. And also afterwards, Numbers 13:33 confirms it. Quote, "And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim. And we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them." It's not a one-off. These are legacy acts. The Dead Sea Scrolls, Book of Giants names them. Ohia, Mahaweh, hinting they're not fully gone. Now, how? How are they not fully gone? Why were they not wiped out in the flood? There's various theories on this. I did a video on it if you want to go look at that, where I went into more depth than what I'll go in here, because here my primary goal is their strategies. But I believe it's some form of reconstitution, and it's not just the Raphaim and Nephilim. I believe once they're done, they roam in spirit form, as the Book of Enoch claims. They don't have a home in heaven, because this was what God told them would wind up happening. When the sons of God, the watchers who rebelled and screwed up, beseeched Enoch to go to the Lord of Spirits and request some measure of empathy for their kids. And the Lord said, no, when your kids die, they're going to roam the earth as unclean spirits, because they are, essentially, it boils down to their counterfeit. They don't come from God. They come from a rebellious spirit, and they're altogether evil and rebellious. And if you read the actions that they engaged in and how they ruled, they were tyrants, engaging in bloodlust and cannibalism, eating humans and one another, and even engaging in civil war with each other. Not unlike the tales of the Greek titans fighting with one another and Sumerian gods being jealous and fighting amongst one another. So, but just think reconstitution, Highlander style. These megalithic sites, pyramids in Egypt, ziggurats in Babylon, Göbekli Tepe. These things have names like where they're called places of the gods, or where men become gods. And it could be that blood rituals might be the key, because often human sacrifice is part of the worship at most of these sites. First Enoch 7:5 says their kids devoured one another's flesh and drank blood. Stone and sacrifice as their battery packs? Who knows? There's a good possibility that when these angels rebelled, they lost their connection with their Creator and perhaps became mortal. Like we hear in Greek mythology that even the gods could be killed. But perhaps they renew themselves in some other form through blood ritual and so on and so forth. We'll get into more modern versions of that, but I think there's a good possibility that some level of, since we're told in Scripture that our life force is found in our blood, it might be that they require that source of energy to keep fueling themselves and reconstituting, which is why all throughout history, you have stories of vampirism, blood rituals, beings that are able to live extended periods of time because they either drink blood, bathe in it, and you know the stories. And it's likely tied to that and specific materials that these buildings are made out of, other things use. Mercury, liquid mercury may play a role in this somehow. We're not sure. Nobody knows with certainty, but we do know they keep coming back somehow, either through portals that they know how to operate and we don't yet, but we're learning. And it could be that specific materials and stonework was used to accomplish those things through frequency, sound, electromagnetism, energy gathered through the air, energy from underneath the earth, aligning with certain star patterns, these kind of things. So take that all into consideration when we're talking about them reconstituting themselves and coming back in various forms and finding the energy to do so in different ways. It may not be as easy as them just popping into existence. They may have to do things first, and especially now that we have a restrainer of lawlessness in place since the work of Christ, it may be even that much more difficult for them to operate and require that much more permission through human decision-making. So they're forms, flexible and flashy, right? Sometimes literal giant gods. You think of Og of Bashan in Deuteronomy 3:11. For only Og, the king of Bashan, was left of the remnant of the Rephaim. Behold, his bed was a bed of iron. Is it not in Rabbah of the Ammonites? 9 cubits was its length, and 4 cubits its breadth. Now, depending on what measurement you use, that's roughly 13 to 15 feet long, and that's a big boy. Sometimes they come as human avatars or use possession. Genesis 6:4. Men of renown could be hosts, or they could just be that not every Nephilim was born a giant, but still was born with incredible strength and power. Other times you have hybrid freaks like Egypt's Anubis, Mesopotamia's Fishman Apkallu. Every culture's got them. Every culture. Olmec heads, Hindu Nagas, posing as gods. Now, no obedient angel is like, hey, worship me, bro, right? You check out Psalm 103:20. Bless the Lord, O you his angels, you mighty ones who do his word, obeying the voice of his word. These guys, they lap up worship. Anu, Zeus, Quetzalcoatl, same crew, different masks. And bloodlines and adherents keep it rolling, right? The Rephaim, the Amorites, post-flood clans, Deuteronomy 2, 20 through 21. It is counted as a land of Rephaim. Rephaim formerly lived there, but the Ammonites called them the Zamzummim, a people great and many and tall as the Anakim. Human sellouts join in. Think Cain's line or Balaam later. This isn't random. It's a cosmic cartel hijacking the created order. In Enoch 15:8 and 9, it nails their state. Quote, and now the giants who are produced from the spirits and flesh shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies. So they're stuck. Shape-shifting, rebuilding. This is the they, and they're obsessed with screwing us over. Their children drowned in the flood because they messed with us. They attempted to take our birthright before the flood and replace us genetically, and they were almost successful. How many families were left? 1. Everybody else was either not fully human or so far under their control that everybody else on that planet, with the exception of Methuselah and Noah's family at that time, were thinking evil thoughts continually, all the time. That is not normal. And I'm afraid that's where we're headed today with other technology. So let's look at the smaller operation here in segment 2. You got smaller scale psyops, slander, which consists basically of slander, lies, and subversion, right? So we've got the they pinned down. We know who these people are. They're the behind-the-scenes spirits, their offspring, and those who support them, right? So very powerful sons of God, mostly known as angels, watchers, whatever you want to call them. Their offspring, which are mostly gone, maybe underground, hiding. There are still reports of giants even today. You can mock that, but there's so many reports of it. I don't see how you could just ignore it. Not to mention, reports of Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and Yeti. These could be a form of some of these offspring as well. So culturally, it's all over the place. They're everywhere, and it can't just be ignored. And so that's who they are. And they have humans who are completely willing to work with them, either through allowing themselves to be avatared, possessed, or they may not even be fully human, but these watchers posing as humans, because we know angels can take human form, and you won't even be aware that that is what you're dealing with. Scripture says it even in the New Testament. And we have examples in the Old Testament of them meeting with Abraham and going into Sodom and Gomorrah. If you don't know what to look for, you may not even notice somebody is one of these angels. And they're obviously not always good. So we got to be careful. So B'nai Elohim are stuck here. Nephilim popping off, blood rituals, and pyramid technology keeping them in the game, shape-shifting like cosmic con artists. So let's zoom in on their small-scale ops, precision strikes, psychological warfare, the dirty whispers that don't need an army, just a well-placed lie. Now, these are the opening jabs in their war on us who are obedient to God, the seed. Genesis 3:15's promise, and they're slick. So let's unpack. I think I've got about 6 examples here, from the garden to the wilderness, and see how they play the long game, one soul at a time. So first up, we have the serpent in Eden, of course. Genesis 3:1-5. Now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, did God actually say that you shall not eat of any tree in the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, well, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. But the serpent said to the woman, well, you will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So, this isn't just, did God say? The Nakash, a divine being per Michael Heiser's Unseen Realm, pulls a legal loophole, right? God's gatekeeping paradise, cancel him, The Targum Pseudo-Jonathan ties this to Samael, or, maybe Azazel's cousin, stuck here, but slithering between realms, So was he possessing a serpent-like creature, or a dragon perhaps, or rocking a hybrid glow-up of some sort? Either way, it's a preemptive strike on Genesis 3:15, right? I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Fractured trust, spin obedience as oppression. The first woke activist with a spirit world, a burner phone, right? It's subtle, but it's the blueprint here, And then, and did you notice that Eve added a command? So he'd already been working on her, right? Like, God is a wet blanket. God is oppressive. He's keeping stuff from you. But the reality is, all he was offering in that moment was a crooked line. Because since God is perfectly just, perfectly loving, and all of these things, which he was getting Eve to doubt, anything that would permit you to decide apart from that perfect line, this knowledge of good and evil that he was promising, is going to be crooked, because we're not perfect. He alone is. So ever since that time, we've had nothing but crooked lines out of humanity and rebellious angels. The degree of crookedness is just how far away you get from that straight line. You got people who maybe tell one lie their whole life, and then we have people like Adolf Hitler, right? or worse. Next up, we have Tubal-Cain. Genesis 4:22, Zillah also bore Tubal-Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. Not some weekend blacksmith. First Enoch 8:1 says that Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates. Tubal is like, hey, screw gardening. Let's stab something, right? His sister, Naamah, they're linked to a demoness in Jewish lore, in Cain's line, as a Nephilim beachhead, maybe? Maybe she is part of what sparked off the initial bloodlines of some of these people. And then we have maybe blood-powered involved with this, with Genesis 4:10-11, quote, "And the Lord said to Cain, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground, and now you are cursed from the ground," unquote. So maybe Cain's murder is a ritual kickstart. Tubal's tech arms humanity against itself, turning stewardship into a bloodbath. Was he possessed or just channeling Azazel's playbook, or just listening to it because he was getting technology in exchange for the women in his life, right? Either way, it's corruption with a forge. Personal, deadly. Definitely Nephilim and Watcher influenced. And then Esau in Genesis 25:29-34, quote, "Once, when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, 'Let me eat some stew, some of that red stew, for I am exhausted.' And Jacob said, 'Well, sell me your birthright now.' And Esau said, 'Well, I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?' And Jacob said, 'Well, swear to me now.' So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob, and then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew." Later, in Genesis 36:2, quote, "Esau took his wives from the Canaanites, Adah, the daughter of Elon, the Hittite." Now, Hittites tied to giant clans, and Genesis 36:31, quote, "These are the kings who reigned in the land of Edom before any king reigned over the Israelites." Who needs a birthright when you've got lentil soup and a Hittite Tinder match, right? So was he possessed, or did a Nephilim avatar whisper sell out big guy? Edom's king's flex rival dominion, right? I really think if you get a chance, you should check out, if you've not heard of the Prometheus Lens podcast. The host of that, Justin Brown, or Doc Brown, has written a book all about Esau and his possible ties to Nephilim, the Watchers, and goes into great detail about his appearance and who or what he may have been. I don't want to reveal too much. You should just read the book. It's really good, and it goes into, well, I'll tell you this much because I know he has said it on his podcast, that the whole exchange there with Esau and his brother Jacob, it is most likely that the whole reason Esau was saying that he was about to die was because he'd been in a fight where he had slain Nimrod and some of his Gibborim servants. And there was more than one. I can't remember how many there were, but just knowing that Esau would have had to have been quite a fighter, and I'm sure he didn't just come away with scratches. So he was literally probably on his deathbed and was willing to sell his birthright, even though he, like many say, he probably had his fingers crossed behind his back. So Obadiah 1:21, Saviors, quote, "Saviors shall go up to Mount Zion to rule Mount Esau, and the kingdom shall be the Lord's." So their hates Nephilim aligned. You dilute Abraham's line, sabotage the seed, slander and pride, and personal hit with cosmic stakes. That's what's going on there. More slander, more sabotaging of the seed, and an attempt to dilute Abraham's line, but it didn't work. So let's dig a little deeper. Lamech, Cain's descendant, Genesis 4:23 through 24. Quote, Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice, you wives of Lamech. Listen to my speech, for I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. Wow. This guy's bragging and twisting God's mercy on Cain into a murder anthem, it seems. First Enoch 10:12 hints at Watcher's influence lingering. Did Lamech tap their vibe via blood rights? His polygamy and violence absolutely mirror Nephilim arrogance. In Genesis 6:11, now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And he's like, Cain got sevenfold protection. I'm going 77. Call me the Og gangster of Genesis. You know, he's the OG, right? So you've got warped morality, mocking divine justice on a small scale, but it's planting seeds for chaos here. Because Lamech wasn't just a nobody. And so his influence here carries through the ages, right? Or it wouldn't have been recorded. So you have the beginnings of warped morality, a mocking of divine justice on a small scale, but it's still planting these seeds. And then we have Nimrod, who Esau slew. Genesis 10:8 through 10, quote, Cush fathered Nimrod. He was the first on earth to be a mighty man. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. Mighty man, Gibram again, right? Jubilees 10:8 through 9 ties him to post-flood rebellion, maybe a Nephilim heir, Babel's Tower in Genesis 11:4. And again, I think the reason these occult groups in this day and age like the number 11 is because of the Babel Tower. They want to break back into heaven. Genesis 11:4, quote, Then they said, Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. A ziggurat. Megalithic technology to defy gods, fill the earth. They did the exact opposite. And this had been building for a while, right? So, we've already seen a pattern now that I'm demonstrating of twisting what God said, perverting it, going our own way. You can just see it. These people are literally telling you through their quotes and the things that they say that they're taking what God originally said and either adding to it in a twisted way or perverting it and deciding in their own eyes what good and evil is, apart from God. And so here's a community effort. Let's all gather together and do the exact opposite of God's command in Genesis 9:1, or in the Tower of Babel episode. Let's just gather together and make a name for ourselves, and then try to re-enter heaven and bring back the golden age of the pre-flood world by building a gate to the gods. So, Genesis 9:1, Babel's the first pyramid scheme, literally. Invest in our tower, folks. We're crashing the divine council. Was Nimrod an avatar, possessed, or blood-juiced by Watchers stuck here? I don't know. There is this tie also with Nimrod into the possible covering of the Nakash from Genesis. I guess you could think superhero outfit, right? You put on this clothing, this article of clothing given to Adam and Eve from God himself, and somehow it changes you. So here we have mass deception starting small, pride as a personal pitch, right? And it's just interesting that Nimrod was able to pull all of that together by listening primarily to the Watchers in rebelling against God and listening to them to build a structure that would allow them to come here from their spirit world into this one, whatever you want to call it. Because it seems to be that there is we have our earthly structure here that we all can perceive. Then there's this buffer realm, spirit realm, if you want to call it, where the Nephilim spirits, unclean spirits, demons, whatever you want to call it, dwell. And their parents, the Watchers, and that seems to be a spirit realm that is between earth and the heavenly realm, where God dwells. It seems like they're not permitted necessarily in that world without his permission. But there's this other area, this gray area, where they can wander. It's not earth necessarily, but it seems to involve earth in some way, and they can step from that world into this one using various methods that we don't, us lay people don't fully grasp or whatever, but obviously those in power, those in these elite circles, those with the knowledge of how to do it, all the way back from Egypt, like I explained in my Egypt video, they retain that knowledge and know how to get them here. And they're rewarded for it, right? They have power, money, riches, fame. And so, finally, we have Joseph's brothers. Genesis 37:18 through 20. Quote, they saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Wow. Selling him instead in Genesis 37:28, because they got into an argument. You know the story. Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit, and they sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. Why? Well, Genesis 37:11, and his brothers were jealous of him. Right? So we have influence, where slander and, quote, dreamer and lies twist their hearts. And the Midianites again. These are Nephilim proxies, right? Did we have a spirit whispering, kill the favored son, thwart Judah's line? Genesis 49:10 says the scepter shall not depart from Judah. So, let's kill this guy off before it ever starts, right? Jealousy's a hell of a drug, and they are the dealers. They. And this is psyops on a personal level. Everyone, slander, lies, subversions, all to chip away at the obedient seeds and ruin us. So segment 3 here. Let's move on to mass deception and bloodline sabotage. Because we're scaling up here. Mass deception and bloodline sabotage, where they don't just whisper to one schmuck, but drown entire nations in lies and corruption. We just gave examples of deceit on individual level and how that could spread, right? And how that could influence and even ruin an entire bloodline. So this is the Nephilim playbook hitting kind of a critical mass, where the B'nai Elohim stuck here, reconstituting via blood and stone and posing as gods to flip humanity's moral compass. So originally I had a shorter version of this, but we're going to triple the segment because it's the runway for part 2 next week and their global con. Think internet level access today, pyramid tech back then. So Genesis 6:5 sets the pre-flood stage. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. That's a lot in those 2 sentences. One family, Noah, stayed pure genetically and morally. I've made the case through the Hebrew words there in previous videos, so we won't rehash that. But it means and can mean both genetically pure and morally pure. Both. It doesn't have to mean one or the other. And it likely meant both. So Matthew 24:37 through 38 warns it's coming again. So, quote, for as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. They. until the day when Noah entered the ark. How'd they pull it off? All right. So we have 6 examples, plus some science to back it up. Could pyramids and dolmens have been part of some sort of hive mind broadcast of evil? I know that sounds far-fetched, but let's dive in here. First, we have pre-flood chaos, Genesis 6, 1 through 5. When man began to multiply in the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive. They took as their wives any they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. And the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of thoughts and of his heart was only evil continually. And then First Enoch says in chapter 7, 1 through 5, and they, the watchers, took unto themselves wives, and they began to go unto them, and to defile themselves with them. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants, who consumed all the acquisitions of men, and began to sin against birds and beasts. Nephilim as giant gods, devouring, defiling, all of that, and plant life. But every thought evil? That's a lot. And again, like I said earlier, it's not normal. So pyramids, think Giza's ancestors and dolmens like Göbekli Tepe's T-pillars as technology, perhaps. And science kind of backs this because we have studies on stone acoustics, Stonehenge research by Salford University that shows megaliths amplify low-frequency sound, resonating for miles. And then add Enoch's 8-3's enchantments, electromagnetic vibes, maybe? I'm conjecturing, I can't be sure. And then if you look into studies on modern brain computer interfaces, BCIs like Neuralink, tweak thoughts with signals, could pre-flood watchers broadcast a hive mind hum, turning humanity into a drone swarm of sin is the idea here. Earth as a dystopian AM radio stations, static of evil, 24/7. And only Noah's clan seemed to be able to dodge the signal, maybe protected by the Lord in some way. And then next, we have the Sodom syndicate, right? In Genesis 14, 5 through 10. In the 14th year, Kedorlaomer and the kings who were with him came and defeated the Rephaim in Ashtaroth Karnaim, the Zuzim in Ham, the Emim in Shavi Kiriathaim, and the Horites in their hill country. Then they turned back and came to En Misfat, that is Kadesh, and defeated all the country of the Amalekites and also the Amorites. Sodom's giant posse, right? Amos 2:9. Quote, Yet it was I who destroyed the Amorites before them, whose height was like the height of cedars. Genesis 19, 4 through 5. Quote, But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last, surrounded the house, and they called to Lot, Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, that is an example of angel lust. Echoes of the Nephilim again. I think they knew these men were angels because I think that was going on. And it's why we had giants even after the flood, because of what was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah. In Ezekiel 16, 49 through 50, Behold, this was the guilt of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters had pride, excess of food, and prosperous ease, but did not aid the poor and the needy. They were haughty and did an abomination before me. I wonder what that was. It sounds like it was the abomination of sleeping with angels again. Giant allies and angel Airbnb. 5 stars for debauchery, right? So Egypt's pyramids nearby. Sound studies, like Paul de Veru's work, show Giza's chambers amplify infrasound, messing with perception. Sodom's giants or possessed hosts beaming pride and lust. It's hard to say, but the combination of both. Either way, mass deception, possibly stone-powered in some way through sound, and Abraham's seed were the ones in the crosshairs. So, then we have Midian's double whammy, right? In Numbers 25, 1 and 3. Quote, while Israel lived in Shittim, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, who were the watchers, the little g gods, angels that desired worship from you and to screw you over. And the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel yoked himself to Baal of Peor. Then Judges 6, 1 through 2, quote, the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of Midian 7 years, and the hand of Midian overpowered Israel. Abraham's kin, Genesis 25, 2, quote, Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah. She bore him Midian. But Moab's pals? The ex who's back, first with a date, then a cavalry? Numbers 31:16. Behold, these, on Balaam's advice, caused the people of Israel to act treacherously. You know, there are dolmens in the Sinai, like Jordan's 20,000 plus megaliths, could have pulsed low-frequency waves per acoustic archaeology. For example, look up Aaron Watson's research. Midian's chiefs as avatars, sinking idolatry to crush morale. There is the possibility of hive mind corruption there. And it put Judah's line on the ropes. And I think it's interesting that in many of these regions you have many, many, many dolmens and many, many, many ways to broadcast a signal with a combination of their literal physical interactions with these people. And then we have Athaliah's hit in 2 Kings 11, 1 through 3. Now when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the royal family. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the king's sons who were being put to death. So he was hidden. Jezebel's spawn, Baal worshiper, and Enoch's cult vibes here, right? Royal family, it's more like royal target practice going on here. A line was trying to be destroyed. Joash survives. Genesis 3:15 clutch here. This is an important. If you don't know who Joash is, if all of them had been killed, there'd be no messianic line. That was the attempt here. 2 Kings 10:27, quote, they demolished the pillar of Baal, Baal's altars, blood-soaked megaliths. It makes me wonder if these might not have been some sort of healing or reconstitution hubs. Studies on electromagnetic fields, like Michael Persinger's God helmet, show magnetic pulses tweak brains. And this makes you wonder, could Baal's stones beam some level of frequency of tyranny deceiving Judah in mass? I think it's possible that some of the technology that existed back then, including the Ark of the Covenant, may have been able to do these kind of things. We have David's line nearly completely snipped. And we have tech-amplified lies. And Babel's con, Genesis 11, 1 through 4. Quote, now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. Oh, lest, it sounds so nice, but really is let's do the opposite of what God said, lest we actually do what he said. Anyway, it's amazing to me. So Nimrod's turf here, Genesis, is what we're dealing with. It's him all over. Genesis 10:10, the beginning of his kingdom was Babel. Ziggurat technology, Dolmenkin defying Genesis 9:1, and God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth." That was the command, not gathered together in one spot and be controlled by the Watchers again like the golden pre-flood era, and possibly be subjected to some sort of technology that was able to control them in their minds. And then Jubilees 10:19 through 21, it flags demonic nudge, Watchers reconstituting via pride. Quote, Babel's the first pyramid scheme, invest now, crash the heavens, using ziggurat acoustics. And the Choga Zanbil studies, if you amplify sound and add electromagnet stuff or EM from blood rights, and you've got a hive mind pridecast, right? Unified humanity, completely deceived, and you scramble the seed's path, and it's pre-flood redo, or part 2. It sounds like an attempt to basically reestablish hive mind control after the flood, using the tower and using the technology taught to them by the Watchers. But it seems as if from that point on, things became very difficult for them. It wasn't as easy as the pre-flood world, and their offspring, it seems like there was breeding issues of some sort, like they didn't live as long, they didn't get as big, they weren't quite as powerful as they were in the pre-flood world, and it seemed like it was easier to come in and out of realms in the pre-flood world than afterwards. And then we have Amalek's ambush in Exodus 17:8-9, where it says, Then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, Choose for us men and go out and fight with Amalek. Deuteronomy 25:17-18, quote, Remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you came out of Egypt, how he attacked you on the way when you were faint and weary and cut off your tail, those who were lagging behind you. Genesis 14 links them to the Rephaim, the descendants of the Nephilim. Numbers 13:29, quote, The Amalekites dwell in the land of Negeb. Remember who the Amalekites are? Blood lickers, blood drinkers, descendants of the Nephilim, Rephaim. 1 Samuel 15:2-3, quote, Thus says the Lord of hosts, I have noted that Amalek did to Israel in opposing them on the way. So, this could be something Nephilim-led or Dolmen-boosted, and the Negev's megaliths humming, fear, who knows? Amalek's the ultimate roadblock, right? No seed for you. We'll cut you completely off, destroy you. There are swarm intelligence studies from Thomas Seeley's bee research, if you're not familiar with it, that show collectives sync via signals. And it makes you wonder, could Amalek's terror campaign hive mind Israel into despair somehow? Or bloodline sabotage on a mass scale? Only Moses' faith holds, right? So how does this tech work? Science says it's not nuts. Acoustics, Stonehenge emits a 10 to 30 hertz waves per Salford's 2016 study, altering mood for miles out. EM fields, Persinger's 1990s experiments flipped brain states with pulses mimicking possession. And then we have hive minds in Cornell's 2012 bee studies show simple signals unify swarms. Now you scale that up with pre-flood stones and you've got a thought jamming network or controlling. Add some blood, Enoch's giants ate flesh, and it's a power grid sinking humanity to evil like a corrupted internet. Noah's Day saw it. And part 2 of next week's got the upgrade. They deceived masses then. And I believe today's Wi-Fi is just somewhat of a remix. They're not done yet. Wait till these new chips come out. These new chips that delve into some other realm, the multiverse, to get their processing info and data way faster than our current digital chips that operate off frequency. So our last segment here, the New Testament escalation in spiritual subterfuge. So we're in the New Testament now, the same Nephilim playbook, but the game really has gone spiritual, sneaky, and kind of downright diabolical. These B'nai Elohim stuck here, reconstituting via blood and stone and posing as gods. They're not just breaking bodies anymore, they're hacking souls, and their end game, I think, is to thwart the one true God, steal humanity's birthright, or our dominion from Genesis 1:26, where it says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion." So are they doing this by twisting us into something non-human? And how? Well, you persuade rebellion, offer power through possession or change, corrupt our essence genetically, perhaps. And it's all to kill the seed of Genesis 3:15 and claim earth for themselves. So, let's give a few examples. And see where they are going all in the New Testament. And then next week we'll go into our times and what they're doing right now. We've touched on some of it, but we'll go into far greater detail next week. So one, the Bashan stronghold in Mark 5:25. "And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, night and day among the tombs and on the mountains. He was always crying out and cutting himself with stones." Legion, right? Mark 5:9. "And Jesus asked him, 'What is your name?' And he replied, 'My name is Legion, for we are many.'" And then Matthew 16:18, 19. "And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven." Bashan. Og's turf is where this is said. Where it says, Deuteronomy 3:11, "For only Og, the king of Bashan, was left of the remnant of the Rephaim." So, we've got a lease on Bashan. Jesus says, lease terminated. Pig pool party time, right? And so 1 Enoch 13:1 says, ties watchers to Mount Hermon nearby, stuck rebels, hopping realms, and Michael Heiser's unseen realm. To quote, he says, "Bashan's a hot spot for the Rephaim, a spiritual stronghold." And here there was an attempt to block the gospel and to utilize possession as turf control. But it didn't work because the Lord of Spirits was there and was reclaiming it and restraining their lawlessness. So, we have an example number 2, Ananias and Sapphira, Acts 5:3-5. "But Peter said, 'Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and to keep back for yourself part of the proceeds of the land? Why is it that you have contrived this deed in your heart? You've not lied to man, but to God.' And when Ananias heard these words, he fell down and breathed his last." Now this is echoes of Eden, right? In 1 Enoch 15:8, quote, "And now the giants shall be called evil spirits upon the earth," right? And it's like they said, well, let's just skim a little off the top. And God says, well, audit complete, you're fired. In Brian Godawa's Chronicle series, he says that demonic infiltration seeks to corrupt the bride from within. And I think that's correct. And so, possession is power, poisons the church and steals its purity. That is one way they seek to infiltrate. You care more about your possessions, it poisons what you're going to do in the church, as clearly illustrated and warned about through Ananias and Sapphira. And that has far-reaching implications even today. And we obviously didn't heed the warning. Then we have the Nicolaitans in Revelation 2:14 and 15. Quote, "But I have a few things against you. You have some there who hold the teachings of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel, so that they might eat food sacrificed to idols and practice sexual immorality. So also you have some who hold the teachings of the Nicolaitans." It's a Gnostic counterfeit. The Nicolas could be a nod to Nimrod. Hey, we've got a new gospel. And Jesus says, yeah, and a new nope. Irenaeus, against heresies in 126 says that the Nicolaitans lead lives of unrestrained indulgence. And some say blood rights. So you have blood rights, posing as gods, subvert the bride, delay the king, rebellion as bait. Lose your human birthright. These are all games they play. And then number 4, we have the temptation of Jesus. Matthew 4:8 through 10. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in their glory. And he said to them, "All these I will give you, if you will fall down and worship me." And then Jesus said to him, "Begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve." So Satan's flex here, offering dominion, stolen from Genesis 1:26, and maybe even given by the men ruling of that day. In fact, it probably was most likely also that as well. So 2 Corinthians 4:4, in their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers. Michael Heiser says that Satan's a usurper, claiming the nations allotted to the watchers. And then Deuteronomy 32:8 through 9, bow to me, get an upgrade. So this is just an attempt to derail the seed, obtain power for rebellion, and align with non-humans. You've got non-human allegiance here. Clearly, the men in power, in government, in riches of that day aligned with Lucifer and had surrendered their right and their responsibility for whatever they received from Hillel in return. And Hillel, or Lucifer, offers these to Jesus in an attempt to make him stumble even. That's a pretty bold move. Makes you wonder why he didn't just kill him. And maybe he wasn't sure that Jesus could be killed at the time. Maybe that's why he asked him to jump, just for a test. But clearly, and this is one of the things I love about our Lord, he always knows and is always 10 steps ahead. And all of his responses are perfect. And then 5, we have Simon Magus, or Magus. In Acts 8, 9, 11, and 18, 19, but there was a man named Simon who had previously practiced magic and amazed the people of Samaria, saying that he himself was somebody great. They all paid attention to him, saying, "This man is the power of God." And when Simon saw that the Spirit was given through the laying on of the apostles' hands, he offered them money, saying, "Hey, give me this power also." So Justin Martyr, First Apology 26, says that Simon was worshipped as a god through the artifice of demons. So, and then you've got him saying, Simon saying, basically, hey, how much for the Holy Spirit downloadable content? This is an example of New Testament possession or being avatared. That's what Simon was. Counterfeit power to deceive the church and steal its birthright. These people thought he was doing these things through the power of the Holy Spirit, and he wasn't. And let that be a lesson to many today, and I'm referring to a fairly recent story. Just because things seem like angels of light leading you through the astral realm and teaching you things doesn't mean that they are. And it's clear there are many of these beings who are the rebellious Elohim. They're not going to, and I know you think you're going to be able to tell the difference, but it's clear that some people are not. And it's best just to heed the warnings of the Lord that says, don't practice divination and don't be messing with this. Just communicate with me, your Lord Jesus. And he would be the one initiating it anyway. But I digress. And any of these things that are willing to do these things, I don't know. Just be careful out there. Be discerning. That's all I'm going to say. Number 6, Judas' betrayal. John at 13:26-27. Jesus answered, "It is he to whom I will give this morsel of bread when I have dipped it." So when he had dipped the morsel, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. Then after he had taken the morsel, Satan entered into him. Right, so I find that interesting because that tells me that angels can not only take human form, but they can also take over a human host who has granted permission through behavior, actions, thought, or deed. Luke 22:3, then Satan entered into Judas called Iscariot, and 1 Enoch 10:8, the whole earth has been corrupted to the works that were taught by Azazel. And what is that? The primary thing here is, hey, sell out the seed, get a big payout, right? And isn't that what we see most of our Hollywood stars and power structures doing today? I like what Brian Godawa said when he said that Judas is a vessel. Demonic possession accelerates the crucifixion. So in this case, sabotage the king, right? Possession as a power grab, and flip humanity's loyalty. That's one of the tactics here. And then 7, Bar Jesus. Acts 13:6-8 and 10. They found a magician, another magician, imagine that. A Jewish false prophet named Bar Jesus, who opposed them, seeking to turn the proconsul away from the faith. But Paul said, "You son of the devil, you enemy of all righteousness, full of deceit and villainy, will you not stop making crooked the straight path of the Lord?" So here we have a sorcerer, possibly using Enoch's Watcher technology that he clearly taught to some humans, In their attempt here, turn off the gospel signal. It's interrupting our attempts to screw over humanity. Heiser says that Bar Jesus mirrors Balaam, a demonic agent in human skin. So the tactic here is to deceive rulers, block the spread of the seed through the gospel, through avataring or possession. It's the same playbook, still going on. And possession seems to be their primary method of operation in this New Testament age. You didn't see so much of it in the Old Testament. You did see some, a spirit would come upon somebody or whatever, but it wasn't widespread. Here, maybe because there's more dead Nephilim and Raphaim and their spirits are roaming, and maybe there was a learning process. I don't know. It may have taken them time to figure out how to be able to do this or to get permission or to do things to be able to enter humans, or maybe it isn't as easy as it sounds, right? But clearly by New Testament times, they had found a way. And then we have the Demetrius riot. Acts 19:24-27. For a man named Demetrius, a silversmith, gathered them and said, "Men, you know that from this business we have our wealth, and you see and hear that this Paul has persuaded and turned away a great many people, saying that gods made with hands are not gods." It doesn't say they don't exist. It just says they're not gods. Okay? And there is danger that this trade of ours may come into disrepute, and that the temple of the great goddess Artemis may be counted as nothing. So here in the New Testament, we still have Artemis as a Watcher cult reboot. Paul's killing our God gig. Anyway, so it's clear the gods are still being worshipped. Tertullian, in his Apology 10, says that demons lurk in idols. So it's not, I think we think that these people are all just simple, superstitious idiots, and they're not. I think we're the idiots and don't realize that demons do lurk in idols, and that these gods did walk among men in ways that were obvious, but are being restrained currently. So this is an attempt at mass rebellion, in protecting the old gods and thwarting the church's dominion as it grew. But guess what? It didn't work. So, false apostles in 2 Corinthians 11:13 through 15. Another tactic. Quote, "For such men are false apostles, deceitful workmen, disguising themselves as apostles of Christ." And no wonder, and get this, please, because I don't think we realize what this really means. It says, "For even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So it is no surprise if his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness." 1 Timothy 4:1, quote, "Now the Spirit expressly says that in latter times some will depart from the faith by devoting themselves to deceitful spirits and teachings of demons." Posing as what? Angels of light. Those of you who keep trotting out there that you're channeling and talking with wise spirits that appear as angels of light, and you feel this love and comfort and wonderment and so on and so forth, please be careful because of verses like this. You do not know what you may be messing with, and you could be being deceived and deceiving others, and that's not good. And their deceptions will rarely ever be obvious. You got to be careful and wise and discerning, because they're always out there saying, "Hey, trust us, we're the real deal." And then I think of something Heiser said, I don't remember what book, but he said Satan's minions mimic. They mimic to infiltrate. They are not going to be obvious. You're not going to be going, "Oh, no, I know what you are." In most cases, you're never going to see it coming. You're not. And the best thing you can do is do exactly what God said to do in these situations, and don't be involved with this kind of activity. Worship Him and Him alone, and don't fall for these things. And so, whether it is through possession or avataring, it spreads corrupt doctrine, and it is an attempt to steal the bride's birthright as well, and destroy things, and corrupt it so that we're not as effective. And it's highly effective. Just look at the church today, right? So Hymenaeus and Alexander, 1 Timothy 1:19 through 20. "Holding faith and a good conscience, by rejecting this, some have made shipwreck of their faith, among whom are Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom I have handed over to Satan, that they may learn not to blaspheme." 2 Timothy chapter 2, 17-18. Quote, "Their talk will spread like gangrene. Among them are Hymenaeus and Philetus, who have swerved from the truth, saying that the resurrection has already happened." The resurrection's old news. Join us. Sounds like the Satan Little Season, where the resurrection's already happened, right? So it's not like this is a tactic that's even being used today and people are falling for it. I hate to say it because there's some people I really like that are falling for this. And then I think of something Brian Godawa said. It's when you have doctrinal rot, demonic deception is in the ranks. And I agree. So in this case, the tactic is rebel for power. Non-human lies erode the seed's victory. Just remember that. And remember not to fall for lies. One of the best ways you can avoid this one is make sure you take in the full counsel of God's word. The full. So Jezebel of Thyatira, Revelation 2:20 through 23. "But I have this against you, that you tolerate that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess and is teaching and seducing my servants to practice sexual immorality and to eat food sacrificed to idols. I gave her time to repent. Behold, I will throw her onto a sick bed, and those who commit adultery with her I will throw into great tribulation. This seems to be a Baal reboot, and Enoch's cult issues echoing. Sex and idols, a new power, folks, right? Irenaeus, in Against Heresy, says that, quote, such teach to cast off the image of God. And I think this is a possession-driven tactic to corrupt the church into rebellion and lose humanity's essence in the process. And we have this all over the place. All you have to do is look at what some church leaders, who they are, first of all, and what sins they engage in, and how they teach others that it's perfectly fine to do so also. And in fact, encourage it. All in the spirit of love, of course, because, they would never disguise themselves as angels of light. And, this is all just about love, right? Love and rainbows. And who would oppose love and rainbows and unicorns, right? How horrible and thoughtless of us to think that anybody's sin is something that's bad. We should embrace and accept all sin because we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I think you get the idea without me being specific. And so, number 12, the Antichrist shadow, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, 3 through 4, and 9 through 10. Quote, let no one deceive you in any way, for that day will not come, unless the rebellion comes first and the man of lawlessness is revealed, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. The coming of the lawless one, is by the activity of Satan with all power and false signs and wonders, and with all wicked deception. But remember, that deception is going to appear like light and goodness. It won't appear as tyranny at first. That's what he's trying to warn you about. 1 John 2:18, quote, children, it is the last hour. Even now many antichrists have come, And what do they all say? I'm your God now, upgrade or bust. And you may not even realize that what you're doing is worshiping someone, but you are. Whether it's weirdly following Hollywood stars or cults of personality, they're humans. Maybe. But either way, only God deserves your worship. So, to me, the Antichrist is the ultimate watcher proxy, right? And in this case, you might, by this time, when the Antichrist is doing this, have some level of mass possession, rebellion, transhumanism, and the ability to steal the earth and, end the entire seed of the woman. Maybe that's why it describes the return of Jesus coming sooner, in those days, because otherwise there wouldn't have been any humanity left, either through death or them being no longer human, because they have allowed themselves to be changed either through the mark or some other method. So he has to return. So let's wrap this up. So we've just run the gauntlet from Genesis to Revelation, the Nephilim playbook laid bare, and it's kind of a doozy. These B'nai Elohim stuck here since their Mount Hermon crash landing, per 1 Enoch 13:1. They seem to be reconstituting via blood rituals and megalithic technology, or some other technology, shape-shifting into humans. We have heard accounts of giants still being around. We also know they can avatar humans or possess, use us as puppets. And they've been at it for millennia. Their gig is to thwart the one true God, derail Genesis 3:15 seed, where it says he shall bruise your head, and Also, swipe humanity's birthright from Genesis 1:26. Let them have dominion. Well, how? They lie, they corrupt, they possess, they attempt to change us genetically, basically anything to keep the king off his throne and us out of our inheritance, right? And to prolong their ability to roam free. So let's kind of connect the dots, because this isn't ancient history. It's the warm-up for part 2 of next week, and maybe a part 3 to blow your mind with today's headlines. So segment 1 gave us they, as rebel angels, Nephilim spawned human sellouts, Jude 1:6 again, and the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority left their proper dwelling, and he's kept them in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgments. Stuck, but still meddling. Dual realm squatters, hopping between dirt and the spirit world, speakeasies. Rebuilding through pyramids and dolmens. You had Göbekli Tepe's stones humming possible evil vibes. And they posed as gods because they wanted worship and control. You have Anubis, Zeus, and you name it. And Michael Heiser's Unseen Realm, the Watchers' Rebellion, fractures the divine order. They're not just chaos agents. They're after Earth, twisting us into non-human pawns. In segment 2, we have small-scale psyops. We have the serpent slanders that God's holding out. We have Tubal Cain forging war technology. From First Enoch 8:1. We have Azazel's legacy. We have Esau selling out for stew. Lamech brags about murder. Nimrod pitches Babel. Joseph's brothers ditch the dreamer. Genesis 37:20. Come on now, let's kill him. And so that's all personal hits, slander, lies, subversion, and they chip at the seeds line specifically. Derek Gilbert, in his last Clash of the Titans, he says that every move targets God's covenant. Psychological warfare from day one. We have seeds of rebellion. They offer power. They fracture trust. It's the same MO on an intimate scale from segment 2. And then in segment 3, we have mass deception that hits. We have pre-flood pyramid technology that seems to sink humanity to evil. Every thought, evil continually. We have Sodom's giant posse lusting for angels. We have Midian seducing and then crushes. We have Athaliah's Baal altars nearly snip David's line. We have Babel's ziggurat pridecast, possibly changing people. Amalek ambushes. Science seems to back it up. Salford's 2016 Stonehenge study, low-frequency waves that can mess with our minds miles away. Persinger's EM pulse, flipping brain states. Dolman's is ancient Neuralinks, possibly. In Brian Godawa's Noah Primeval, megaliths amplify their dominion, a network of corruption. This is a mass scale. Blood and stone juice up the hive mind, leaving Noah's clan as the last pure signal. And Matthew 24, as were the days of Noah. It's a template. And then segment 4, rehash New Testament spiritual escalation. We have Bashan's legions squatting, Ananias lying, Nicolaitans counterfeiting. Satan tempts Jesus. Simon Magus tries to buy power. Judas sells out. Bar-Jesus blocks. Demetrius riots. We have false apostles mimicking. Hymenaeus twisting. Jezebel seducing. The Antichrist is always looming in the future in 2 Thessalonians 2:9 with his lying signs and wonders. And Heiser reminds us that Satan is a usurper. He's a proxy for the Watchers. And Derek Gilbert, possession and deception, they are rewriting humanity's code. So you have possession, rebellion, transhuman bait, stealing dominion, kill the seed, make us non-human host or rebels. Irenaeus in Against Heresies 126, quote, they cast off the image of God. So it's all connected. Genesis' 3:15 war is definitely ramping up. So here's the thread, really. You've got segment 1, they're trapped, tech-savvy God posers. In segment 2, they whisper lies to break individuals that influence the rest of culture. In segment 3, they broadcast corruption to drown nations through mass appeals. In segment 4, they infiltrate spiritually, offering power to ditch our birthright. Why? To steal Earth and the Genesis 1:26 dominion, and us with it. How? By turning us against God through rebellion, by turning us into them to some degree through possession, or into something else, non-human, through genetic engineering. Every move is a serpent's loophole to the Antichrist throne, and it targets the seed, the king, and the plan. Brian Godawa says it's a cosmic coup. They want the keys. Derek Gilbert also says, from Eden to AI, it's the same strategy. Control the narrative, right? So in part 2 next week, it's the same MO, but there's a modern twist. Pre-flood dolmens, today's internet, 5G, hive mind. Anyone? Sodom's lust, the media's propaganda, pornography, Athaliah's purge, eugenics 2.0, Antichrist signs, deep fakes, and transhumanism. Matthew 24, eating and drinking, becomes our scrolling and swiping. And don't forget that Matthew 24's eating and drinking mentions the they again. So they may be eating and drinking and marrying among us at some point in the future. It's just the days of Noah rebooted. If you've ever read The Day the Earth Stands Still by Derek Gilbert, he mentions that tech is their new altar. It's mass deception on steroids. They've traded swords for screens, blood rights for algorithms. And part 2 is where we see the upgrade. And part 3, I plan to give personal examples, people examples. It's interesting that we have UFO cults that seem to be whispering things that sound like possession, and big tech pushing non-human futures. And then you have globalist lies that seem to be sinking the masses together in a one world type state or mindset. The unseen realm is still active. And so we'll dig into those headlines, maybe bring up some posts, patents, whistleblowers, showing how they never quit, from Eden's snake to 5G towers, Bashan's demons to AI avatars. It's one playbook. Lie, corrupt, steal. Genesis 3:15 wins. Revelation 20:10, and the devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire. But they fight dirty till the end, folks. So make sure you share this and dig deep into other texts to get like the Book of Enoch, to get a more flushed out idea, because it seems as if Moses, in recording many of these things, was recording headline news, because many of the people of that time were already familiar with these stories because they were familiar with Enoch. I've already gone into this in other videos, but it's clear that Second Temple Jews were utterly familiar with Enoch, because the number one title Jesus used for himself consistently throughout the New Testament was Son of Man. And the only place I know of that title, as a title, not a description for somebody who looks like a human, like you find in Daniel and Ezekiel, but as an actual title that he has used for himself, was in the Book of Enoch. So, if you're game, part 2 Monday will be of next week. We'll do the more modern madness that they're engaged in, and in part 3, if you're game, we're going to expose today's con artists that are roaming around today, and show you who they are and what they do today. So, everybody stay sharp. Make sure you're here for next week's part 2, and the week after that, part 3. And if you want to be notified of that, then make sure that you subscribe, like, share, and stay in touch. And if you want to support us, there's various ways to do that. You can visit our band's webpage at pilgrimsgray.com and listen to our music. Our album Elevensies tells a story of very similar subjects. And of course, you can always get our merchandise or gear if you want to support us, or buy the album or our PDF storybook that goes along with the album that has the lyrics and actual story that goes all along with it. So on some of our instrumental tracks, there's a story that goes along with that you're not going to see on Spotify. You'll see the lyrics synced on Spotify, but you won't see the story unless you go to our band webpage and get a hold of the PDF book with images and the story. And of course, support the podcast. I'm going to start including links if you want to go there. And you can always, if you're on YouTube listening to this, hit the help and buy us a cup of coffee, for $2 to support us. Or just comment and let us know what we're doing right. And I also appreciate those of you who tell us what we're doing wrong. It helps us to improve. So with that in mind, I am going to play you out with some awesome music that we're working on for our second album. And you guys have an awesome work week.